Really good to see. I loved your talk the other night you gave at the Universalist. You know, that was really good. And the whole presentation, the theme is really important, and I'm really glad we could put this together.
Great, thanks. Me too.
Welcome to Manhattan Network Public Access.
Yes,
and welcome to you in the audience. A pleasure, a great distinct pleasure for me to welcome to the program Michael Dowd. Michael Dowd is he's America's evolutionary evangelist, right? And he's also the author of a book. Michael, could you hand it to me? Let's show it right at the outset now. It's a book that's just out now, and it's called, he's a reverend, we're going to be talking about that, but he's written a book called Thank God for Evolution. And if I'm not mistaken, he's trying to bring together some of the worlds of religion and also evolutionary science and so forth in a very interesting way. And we're going to be talking about this book, showing some clips from a DVD and talking to him about his life's experience. So you got Rabbi Michael Lerner here and others that have published. 5 Nobel Prize winners have recommended this book, something that we should all be aware of. And Michael, welcome really very, very much to Conversations. A great pleasure.
Thank you, Harold.
I was happy to hear you originally from, and I always ask the people when we're doing a program to begin their own life, born and raised, educational. You hail from up Poughkeepsie way.
Exactly.
I used to hang my hat over at New Paltz, the college near there. It's a lovely part of the country. But could you share a little of your own background as a way of wading into this discussion about the book and science and religion and so forth?
Sure, be happy to.
Thanks.
I grew up Roman Catholic and lived in Poughkeepsie for about 11 years, or the Poughkeepsie area. My parents divorced and we moved to Miami, and I basically sort of fell away from the church during my teenage years. Struggled a lot with drug and alcohol and sexuality issues in my teenage years, and when I was 20 I had a born-again experience in Berlin, Germany. I was in the Army.
You were in the United States Army then? Enlisted or officer?
Yeah, no, enlisted. Yeah, I was a military police officer.
Road to Damascus kind of epiphany?
Exactly. Yeah.
Really? Want to share it?
And well, it was. I went and saw a Billy Graham Association film, and it was one of these, you know, grab you by the heart films. And
you hadn't been into Graham and all that? Or?
No. But it was the first time that I had heard a conservative evangelical presentation of the gospel, and it just made sense to me. And I was struggling mightily with my sinful nature, and so I basically made a profession of Christ at that time, and then was involved in an Assemblies of God church well, I went to an Assemblies of God college, went to an Assemblies of God church, and got my Master of Divinity at a Baptist school, American Baptist.
You're Baptist?
At an American Baptist seminary, right? Eastern Baptist Theological Seminary.
Where was that?
In Philadelphia.
In Philly, okay.
Right, so I went, did my undergraduate at Evangel in Springfield, Missouri, and then went and did my graduate work, Master of Divinity program, and then I ended up pastoring 3 churches over the course of a decade. So I went from being rejecting of evolution and completely fearful of evolution.
You were that early on in your...
Oh, yeah.
Were you thinking about these things as a teenager and so forth? Were you reading? Because I know you were very much adhering to Chardin.
Yeah, no, not at the time. I basically, the people I prayed and worshiped with, the people I went to church with, the books I read, the people I hung out with, were all coming from an anti-evolutionary, biblical fundamentalist perspective.
And so Family
no, my family's Roman Catholic.
Well, Chardin was Catholic.
Yeah, but I used to pass out tracts, you know, those little pamphlets, and I would argue with anybody who thought the world was more than 6,000 years old.
No fool.
Yes.
You were that way.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Are you talking about when you're 20 years old?
In my teens, in my late teens, and especially early 20s, right?
But you were even thinking of those things. A lot of people don't even think of those.
Yeah, exactly.
They're thinking of drugs, sex, and rock and roll.
Exactly. Yeah, my late teens was that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
But
got something to do with testosterone.
Yes, testosterone. Right, exactly. Yeah, when I was 20, 21, 22, 23, I'd say that I was anti-evolution. But I think when I was 22 or 23 at Evangel College, they held up a textbook that we were going to use, and I knew that textbook had taught evolution, and I couldn't believe. Here I was at an evangelical college, a Bible-believing college, and they were teaching evolution. I literally picked up my books, walked out of class, and slammed the door.
No kidding.
I went to the registrar's office and withdrew from the course.
No fooling.
In fact, I told my roommate, Satan obviously has a foothold in this school.
Oh, you were into that? You were really committed. Yeah, right.
And so what happened was 2 things. One is I met the biblical studies and philosophy professors at Evangel were all very godly men and women, and I had prayed and worshipped with them and stuff. And then I discovered, only after the fact, that they had embraced evolution, that they accepted an evolutionary worldview.
And you're saying, hey.
So I didn't know how to do that.
Right.
You know, but I couldn't write them off as being demonically possessed. It just, you know. But then I met a Buddhist Christian. I met this guy who had been a monk for 7 years. He had graduated from Harvard with a degree in Buddhist and Indian philosophy, went to India and he was teaching Buddhism there, but he had an internal bleeding and a Catholic priest convinced him to pray for healing, and he prayed and was healed. So he didn't stop being a Buddhist, he also expanded to include Catholicism. Came back to the States, became a Trappist monk like Thomas Merton.
Yes, right, Merton's great, seven-story.
He was a monk for 7 years, and then he went to Yale Divinity School, got his Master of Divinity at Yale, and then when I met him, he was back in Missouri as a lay Catholic chaplain. That is, he wasn't a priest, he actually was getting married. He's been married for the last 25 years, but he was a Catholic chaplain.
Right.
And so his theology was so liberal. He was into all this evolutionary theology.
So inclusive, right?
So inclusive and so liberal at the time that my theology said he was going to hell. But my heart said he was the most Christ-like person I'd ever met. So my head said, get him saved, but my heart said, ask him to mentor you. And my world expanded as a result of that.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
So then I went on after that to Eastern Baptist Theological Seminary in Philadelphia, graduated from there, and then pastored 3 churches, 3 United Church of Christ congregations. One in Western Massachusetts, one in Southeast Ohio, and then my last church was in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So
Ann Arbor,
almost 10 years.
That's my family background. They all went to Ann Arbor. Yeah.
And then,
nice town.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
And then for 5 years or 6 years, I did environmental sustainability ministry. Basically, I helped community organizing. I helped neighbors come together and support each other in using less water, driving less, composting, recycling, all the different aspects of living more earth-friendly.
That's coming into a new impetus now, isn't it?
Really
I
is.
mean, in big terms.
It really is. And also, for 1 year, I got a chance to work with the religious leadership of the United States on key environmental issues that were coming up for a vote in Congress.
Would it be national churches?
It was the National Environmental Trust, and I organized Jewish rabbis, Catholic priests, Protestant clergy, and evangelical clergy, and Unitarian Universalist clergy on key environmental issues.
You sort of expanded your consciousness a bit in terms of what you're including in your view of the universe.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then I met my wife, Connie Barlow, who's a science writer. I met her 7.5 years ago, and we've been married for the last 7 years.
Oh, wonderful.
We've been living permanently. Last place we lived was in Rockland County, New York. And we've been traveling nonstop for the last 6.5 years, speaking in, living in people's homes, anywhere from a few days to a week or more. We sleep in our van. It's our bedroom on wheels.
It's a very nice van.
Yeah, it's a high-top Mercedes. It's a Dodge Sprinter. But what we do is we're speaking 3 or 4 times a week in churches and colleges and universities and you know, all different kinds of religious and non-religious settings, Christian and non-Christian, just the whole gamut.
And keeping track